I had the incredible privilege and pleasure and honor of leading a crazy, wonderful experimental place called the Buzzfeed Open Lab for Journalism, Technology, and the Arts for the last 2 years. It was an experiment, and like some experiments, you realize at the end that what you need to do is shut down the experiment and spread it thin and wide. So the Open Lab is no longer with us, and I am working on some other very cool and interesting projects, but my new projects don't have things you can use yet. So I'm going to talk to you about some of the things that we built in the Open Lab and ways that you can use them now and what we learned from that. The first thing that I want to say is, so I should say, in the Open Lab, we built a lot of things. One of the Open Lab fellows was a woman named Christine Sunu, who built an entire menagerie of animals that illustrated the different ways that you can use IoT, or Internet of Things, connected objects, to take in information and pass on information. We built some very cool virtual reality frameworks and designed some very cool camera infrastructure. I'm not going to talk about those things. I'm really specifically going to focus on bots that we built and what we learned from them. Also, I should be clear that there's a lot of different kinds of bots. I'm not really interested in the bots that can make a couple of people in a garage feel like an army. I am really interested, however, in bots that we as a newsroom at BuzzFeed News could use to create more dynamic relationships with our audiences and maybe involve our audiences in how we tell the stories that we're telling. So we started by building some very, very annoying bots. We built a bot that fed puppies, another one that listened for keywords and responded to some things. They were kind of dumb, but sometimes dumb stuff inspires more dumb stuff. And then from there, you can get really smart, interesting stuff. And so my first lesson that I would pass on to you is, don't be afraid to try something silly first. Don't make your first experiment the most important thing ever. Experiment with the silly stuff and then move on. So after a bunch of experimentation, we had two things that we really wanted to do. We wanted to play with the Facebook Messenger API, which at the time was being used primarily to build shopping tools. Sort of, I see that you're looking at a shirt. Would you like to see other shirts? Would you like to see pants? And you say, oh, I want to see other shirts. And that didn't seem particularly interesting. And where we saw newsrooms using the Facebook Messenger API, they were very consistently sort of translating that sales process into new stories. And we wanted to play with whether we could do some audience building and some source building with a Facebook Messenger bot. The other thing that we really wanted to do was find a playful way to cover the presidential nominating. This was the summer of 2016. Politics fun. Whew, doesn't anymore. But we built BuzzBot, which was a Facebook Messenger bot that invited people to help us cover the presidential nominating convention, starting with the Republican in England and followed by the Democratic National Convention in Philadelphia. And the way that the bot worked is you had to say something, you'd say anything to it, and it would start to ask you questions. And we asked you a whole series of questions about why you were interested in the why you were interested in the Republican. And there were a few options for your answers, and based on that, we could sort of segment how we sent questions to you. So if you told us that you were a convention delegate, we would send you very different questions than if you told us that you were outside the convention protest. One of the things that you'll notice if you can read this, which you might not be able to, is that the first set of questions all assumed that you were interested. And it didn't occur to us that with this massive splash all over BuzzFeed News' Facebook page, the vast majority of people who responded to the bot were actually not following the convention at all. And the second largest group of people were kind of interested in the convention, but certainly were not in Philadelphia or in Cleveland at all. And it seems incredibly naive now, but at the time we were so focused on ways to get folks in Cleveland involved in how we told this story that we didn't think at all about all the other people. And so that's something that I think is a really important lesson. I see this over and over in people's bot projects. I've tinkered with a lot of newsroom bots, is usually when you set out to build a bot like this, you're thinking about something that you want. You're thinking about something that you want your audience to tell you. And that's awesome, and you should definitely think about that. but you should also make sure that you're thinking about everybody else. And so that when all those other people who aren't who you're looking for raise their hand and say, hey, I'm here, I would love to talk to your bot, your answer isn't just like, yeah, no, not you. So there's always going to be outliers. There's always going to be people you weren't expecting. Figure out what you're going to say to them to include them, ask them for stories. Even if you don't want those stories, ask them for something so that they feel welcome. The other thing that we learned very, very quickly is that good reporters are far, far better at reporting than anybody else. So we sort of thought that we could use BuzzBot to build an army of sources on the ground at the convention, especially among the protesters, and that we could get stories a lot faster. And very, very, very consistently, what we found is we would sort of hear a rumor, we would ping folks who were at the convention with the bot and ask them if they were seeing what was happening, ask them a bunch of questions, and by the time we got answers back, BuzzFeed's reporters had already gotten over there, tracked down what was happening, talked to somebody. Often they had recorded and cut a video and posted it online before we ever got answers back from the sort of collection of other folks on the ground who weren't reporters who were using the bot. So it was an experiment, we were playing around, but we definitely learned that reporters are far better at doing their job and fact-checking and doing the research work than a sort of miscellaneous army of untrained folks. That said, this is about 6 months later that the coup in Turkey happened, and we weren't able to fire the bot back up, but the international news team came to us and was like, can we use this? Because the difference was that we didn't have reporters on the ground there. And so if you can have reporters on the ground, they're always gonna work faster. But I think there's a lot of interesting opportunities to start to build those conversations with your community so that they can, they weren't kidding about this short time, so that they can actually help you cover a story if you can't be there physically on the ground. The other thing that we learned that's really important is that you should always read your logs. There was a lot of things that we saw that were super clear that we could have planned for, but again, we didn't know what was gonna happen. We didn't know who was gonna use it. And we would look, and one of the things that we saw was that people are really, really good at talking to bots. People would sort of rephrase questions and keep trying until they got the answer that they were trying to get. So here's someone she started by saying, who is speaking right now? Which is not a crazy question. And if you've ever watched something like a big political event like that, it's a question that comes up all the time. You're sort of watching and everyone's clapping and people seem really interested and you're like, I don't know who that is. And then her next question was, when will Hillary speak? Which was probably what she really wanted to know to begin with. And then her third question was just help. And we didn't have answers to any of those. And we probably should have had answers to all of those. And by the next day, we absolutely did. So we were we were watching the logs and looking for things that people wanted. And so who is speaking? And there's a few variations on that, but that's a pretty easy prompt. And we can say, it sounds like you would like the schedule. And then throw the schedule back. And it wasn't always exactly perfect and exactly the answer to their question, but at least got them to kind of dial into what they wanted. Similarly, when will Hillary speak? If we answer that with the schedule for the evening, they've probably got what they want. Help, you should always have some kind of response to a help request. So the other thing that was very, very cool about the Open Lab is that everything that we built was and is open source. You can find all of our tools on GitHub. I don't necessarily recommend picking up the code for BuzzBot and using it to build your Facebook Messenger bot, but if you're thinking about playing with a Facebook Messenger bot, there might be a lot there that kind of inform how you think about looking, and I apologize to the translators because I know I start sentences and don't finish them, but looking at the ways that Wesley Palermo, who was the engineer who really built this, solved problems might help inform how you're gonna solve problems. Whoa, I was warned that that would happen. Okay, we built a bunch of other bots the following year, including a bunch of SMS bots that let you kind of trade music and fortunes. You can play with the code for those. We also built a voicemail bot that let you call in, it collected stories and recorded them, and let you listen to other stories. And so we experimented with it in a few different ways, but one of the things that we did was we worked with See Something, Say Something, which was Buzzfeed's Muslim Affairs podcast, to collect iftar stories during the month of Ramadan immediately following Trump's immigration orders. And we just asked people to talk about how it feels to be Muslim in America right now. Very simple prompt. And we collected stories from that. We learned a lot that sort of built on what we were learning from BuzzBot. But one of the things that we learned is it's really, really hard to get people to pick up the phone. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. It just means that if you're building a bot that is actually asking people to pick up a phone and make a call, you should expect fairly low numbers of calls. The other thing that I think we knew but also confirmed is that your audience is always changing, and people who are not willing to call in this week might be willing to call in next week, and you shouldn't just give up just because something didn't work the first time. But sort of keep playing with it. And we actually, with the iftar stories and with a few of the other voicemail bots that we built, we continually changed the prompts. We found very quickly that people were hanging up before it got to the end, or the recording was getting cut off. And so figuring out how to make sure that people knew that it was time to stop talking with time to wrap up their sentence was really important. But also, don't assume that once you've figured out how your audience is going to engage with this bot, that's always going to be how they're going to engage. And I think I just rephrased this, but nothing good happens overnight, right? Don't expect your first bot to take off overnight. Expect that you're going to have to keep trying and kind of tweaking the tone and tweaking the language until it's actually something that your audience and your community is happy engaging with. BuzzFeed continued to build a lot of bots. I've seen a lot of other newsroom bots. I will put the presentation online so you can kind of see. I have links in there to all of these, but there's a lot of other ways in which newsrooms have tinkered with and used bots, especially SMS bots, to keep their audience kind of connected. I'm gonna just tear through a couple of things. You don't have to build this yourself. A lot of the Open Lab tools very much require you to be able to kind of install something on a server and run code. There are some services, including GroundSource and Harken and Coral, that will, in very different ways, help you build your own and can support you through that. There are probably a lot of other tools as well. And the last thing I'll say is that if that wasn't awesome and exciting for you, I still love you. We can still be friends. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to be doing a workshop about the field guide to security training in the newsroom. I'm super happy to talk to folks about that. I'm also collaborating with folks. I teach data journalism at UC Berkeley in the journalism school, and I'm collaborating with some really smart folks to build out a data journalism textbook. It's all in English. That's silly. So it's also all open source. So I would love to talk to folks about making that more accessible and bigger and better and more awesome. And I am personally responsible for the thread, safety pin, and ball of yarn emoji, which will be on computers like 6 months before the mate emoji. So if you want to talk about emojis and how to get them passed, we can still be friends there too. Thank you.